Hello, I'm Johan Chabanyu, and yes, welcome to Brain Injury United. In 2010, I was in a near-fatal car accident that resulted in me acquiring a brain injury. Well, what is a brain injury, you might ask? By definition, a traumatic brain injury, or TBI, refers to damage or destruction of brain tissue due to a blow to the head resulting from an assault, a car accident, a gunshot wound, a fall, or the like. It is the same as a concussion or any other form of head trauma. And that is why I do this show, to raise awareness on a medical condition that keeps growing and that has affected the best of us, and to provide resources to make sure our survivors get the help they need. On today's show, we will interview Joe Tulin, a traumatic brain injury survivor from Massachusetts that has an amazing story to share. And we will speak to Samuel Paul LaPierre, a Lawrence, Massachusetts business owner and teacher at Greater Lawrence Technical School, that will share how he and his family deal with their traumatic, shocking experience. Then I will share a tip from an anonymous head trauma victim on how they cope with brain injury. But before we start, I'd like to start with some words of motivation from Napoleon Hill. It says, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." Joe, what does this quote mean to you?
Well, Johan, I think that this is a very motivational quote, and it's very important to the recovery from brain injury, where challenges get put into people's lives who experience trauma and brain injury from concussions and other contacts which leave you with an injury. And the way that you recover is you need, and this is often medically aided, you need to see an image of yourself getting better, and then you need to put together a plan in order to achieve it. And then once you achieve it, it feels much better. Mm-hmm. So I'm in that process myself. I've had a few brain injuries because of motor vehicle accidents.
Okay, and that goes into what I wanted to speak to you about. Share your story.
Well, my story started several years ago. I was in several motor vehicle accidents where it wasn't my fault. I was just driving along safely, and some other cars would come and drive recklessly around me, resulting in a rear-end collision that just slammed in the back of me. I was jostled forward and suffered a concussion, resulting in post-concussion syndrome.
Okay.
And post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. After the first one, I was experiencing a traumatic effect where in the brain injury community they call it a before and after effect to do with your brain injury. So before I was feeling good, and then after I was hit with the motor vehicle accident, I was not feeling good. So I sought the advice of my primary care physician, mm-hmm. and they referred me to a neurologist and also a chiropractor. So I went into treatment and I started to get my diagnosis, and that helped me to understand what I needed to do in order to get better.
Now, do you feel like you were correctly diagnosed?
Yes, I think I was correctly diagnosed.
Why?
Because I was feeling the things that were synonymous with the diagnosis. So I was having trouble forming short and long-term memories. Mm-hmm. I was having trouble with exhaustion and fatigue. I was having trouble with pain and discomfort. I was having trouble regaining my my good feeling. Like I would just feel awful.
So, feeling awful from being in the accident, but the accidents weren't your fault. Is it safe to say that you had feelings of paranoia on the road, being that other drivers were crashing into your vehicle?
Yes, very much so. I was paranoid in a way that I knew I had to pay much more attention to all three of my mirrors in my car when I was driving.
Your surroundings.
Yes, to make sure that people, who were driving radically, I would be able to defensively drive and like switch lanes or be well out of their way so they could pass by me, so I wasn't putting myself in front of them where they would hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that is explained in the treatment of motor vehicle survivors, is to be more cautious on the road and always be looking through all of your mirrors to protect yourself from oncoming hazards.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about your experience?
Yeah, so I've gotten very involved in the brain injury community. I've done things from neurology to psych neuro testing, chiropractic treatment, massage, physical therapy, including vestibular therapy, speech cognitive therapy, which I particularly think that people who have suffered any sort of concussion are advised to try this type of therapy out, because it helps you understand who you are and what your capabilities have been and what you lose or are at risk before and after a brain injury. Mm-hmm. And it really helps you understand what you need to be prepared to deal with, and the losses you might suffer as a result of a brain injury.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's amazing. You've done a lot, and what would you like to accomplish in the community?
Well, I like to be very active in the community. I do a lot of peer support. I go to monthly groups in several areas throughout Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and I try to tell people my story and all the therapies that have been successful for me and what other resources that are out there that people can turn to help them recover from their brain injury.
Okay.
This is often a very long journey for people.
Right.
So as soon as they can connect to this brain injury community, the better, because it's really open to helping people feel better, understand their deficits is what they call it, which are absence of ability, and to help them succeed in life.
And I'm happy that you used the word journey, because that's exactly what it is. Being in a situation where an accident happens to you, or you happen to be in an accident and you have to get better, you don't get better overnight.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So
it's been a few years for me so far, and of all the people that I've met with brain injuries, mm-hmm. they've been longer than me, most of them.
Right. And it is a journey to recovery. Where can people go to get involved?
Well, I would start with your primary care physician, and then they would refer you to rehab hospitals in the area, as well as neurologists and speech pathologists, and they are normally who manage support groups and referrals to different therapies. Also, there is an organization called the Massachusetts Brain Injury Association,
yes,
based in Westboro, who help to organize most of the peer support community and often have resources that individual hospitals contribute to.
Okay. And as far as your involvement in the community and wanting to see a change in the community, of getting more people involved, and not only people that suffer from brain injuries, but also caretakers, in what time frame do you believe these things can take place?
What time frame?
Yes.
Well, I think that in the first few months, the feeling is very traumatic. You are not really sure what is going on, and you just sort of have to trust what your primary care physician says and go through the different therapies. So that's like the first 3 to 6 months. Then after that, the recovery often gets more accelerated, sort of in an intermediate phase, and you start to plan out your life, not really as an emergency, but as an ongoing lifestyle. Some people call it your new life, living with disability as a survivor of a brain injury. And at that point, the socialization really helps a lot, and that can last for the rest of your life.
Right. And why is this important?
It's important to understand what your experience is from another person's perspective, because sometimes you live with things that bother you, and there are medical solutions to make you get relief from those problems, which doesn't mean you go out and, you take chemicals or anything like that. It means that you just understand why your interaction with the world is not as high functioning as some other people, and to know what you need to say and do to say, oh, well, this is my life story. This is what happened to me. I was in a car accident or had a heart attack or a stroke or a gunshot wound, and that's why I am who I am. And try to understand that, and that helps people move along in the way that they present themselves to people.
You touched on a key point here, and you mentioned the effect of having to function, but you don't function at the same level as everyone else around you, maybe a little less than everyone else around you. And that is why I begin the show with motivation, and I like to touch on motivation, just to give people the belief that as long as they believe in themselves, they can still accomplish the things. You may be used to getting straight A's, so to speak, but you may have to settle for a few B's and some C's. You still get your degree at the end.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that that's also a motivating example to follow, is that the accommodations for this type of disability are brought to the healthcare associated with it. So right now, another element of the community that I'm looking to help develop is one-on-one cognitive care, where there's a lot of personal care assistance associated with physical limitations, and many people in the brain injury community actually have severe physical limitations. They're in wheelchairs or need to walk with canes and have aphasia, which means like part of their face doesn't work right, and things like that. But for other people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, especially, it's all just...
Also known as PTSD.
Yes. It's really their cognitive limitations. So they might not be able to memorize things as much. They might be a little bit slower to speak with, or people might seem like they don't have patience to deal with them or something, and they need some extra help in life. So I'm really advocating right now to get some extra support for those people.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, I think that it's important for people to understand that people with post-traumatic stress disorder, post-concussion syndrome, and other types of traumatic brain injury, whether they're at fault or not, it's something that people need to learn about, and they need to be sensitive to, and they need to know what their role is. But everyone are involved in the community when you interact with people, and I guess my best wisdom is that you just need to look at the people like they're regular people, and try to help them out where you can.
Yeah.
And when you can't, there are other people in the healthcare community looking out for them.
Yeah. Well, Joe, Tulin, thank you for coming to the show, and thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks, Johann. It was a pleasure to come here today.
All right.
And now we have Samuel Polo Pierre on the show. Samuel Polo Pierre. Polo,
Yes, sir.
it's great to have you on the show,
No,
my
the
brother.
pleasure's mine. The pleasure's mine. It's a good thing to be here. You know what I mean? Representing. Absolutely.
right.
It's a great thing. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure's all mine.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, sir. And
Sir.
give our viewers a quick introduction on who you are.
My name is Samuel Polo Pierre, business owner. I own a salon and a barbershop in Lawrence called El Cote Mexico. I'm also the second vice president of the Merrimack Valley chapter of the NAACP. Also, I'm also a Greater Lawrence technical instructor. I teach in the barbering department, and I'm also a married, happily married, man with 4 kids at home. 1 year old, 3 years old, 15, and 18-year-old girl.
Bless you.
Yes, sir. Indeed. Blessed.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Share your story.
Be honest with you, the story is really not my story. It's a Lawrence story. It's to my family story, but it's really not my story. It's a story. It's a Lordtown story.
So, who is this story about?
The story is actually about Michelet Cadet,
Who is Michelet Cadet?
one of my cousins. So it's a Lordtown story. My cousin Michelet Cadet, he was killed in his home.
Wow.
Right in his house, a couple feet away from his bedroom.
What happened?
It was morning of January 22nd, 1998. I was in barber school, attending barber school, and one of my cousins and one of my best friends came to pick me up at the school. And the school had glass windows, and I can actually see them coming in, and wasn't smiling, wasn't waving at me, nothing like that. So something seemed kind of odd. I immediately thought that maybe something was happening to my father, because my father travels to the DR, usually around winter months, and it happened to be January, so my father was gone. And then the director came and grabbed me, pulled me to the side, and brought me to a room with a counselor there, and they had informed me that Michelet was killed.
Wow. How did this happen?
Well, we got to Lawrence, 42 Kendrick Street, with his house, with his mom owned. And we got there, yellow tape, cops everywhere, investigating the whole thing. First floor, second floor, third floor, the attic, the whole 9 yards, even the basement. And we learned that there might have been a scuffle in there. Not sure exactly if it was a home invasion or something like that, but whatever it was, it definitely was a fight in there, as if he was defending himself. There was definitely a scuffle because there was chairs flipped over, drawers open, as if like the person, or the killers I should rather say, was looking for something. And the neighbors said that they saw a couple people leaving her in and running around in the backyard. He was shot several times. He was shot one in the hand, one in the groin area, one in the stomach, one in the leg, and the main bullet that I believe that took in his life was one in the head. The article in the newspaper said that he was killed execution style, as if like someone came in there to make sure that he was not going to be able to walk again.
Wow.
Yep, this happened in 1998.
1998.
About 20 years ago.
About 20 years old. What does that make it today?
Well, I mean, ironically, the thing about it, today's his birthday. God bless him, and heaven. Happy birthday in heaven. God bless his soul.
Happy birthday, Michel.
Yep, today's his birthday. He would have been 44 today. So it's been 20 years of unsolved. No, the killer was never found. No one knows exactly who the person is. For a while, I was, I was hurt, because we Lawrence guys grew up in the Boys and Girls Club. At that time, it was called the Boys Club. Attended ABA basketball camp, and we knew a lot of people. So I was hurt at the fact that somebody could take one of us and murder us. You know what I mean? In that form of way. You know what I mean? And for the city not to say anything about it though. So even though it's a Lawrence story, but personally I was hurt. I was like, how can we were raised in this Lawrence. We came from Harlem, New York. We came from New York, and we lived over there first, and then we came to Lawrence and was raised in Lawrence. Spent most of our life in Lawrence, and for someone to take one of our family members and kill them that way, I was hurt for a while. I was hurt, traumatized.
Traumatized. This definitely is a trauma, and my blessings go out to you and your families and anyone else is going through this.
Thank you.
Why is it difficult to cope with this type of trauma?
Any type of trauma like that would be extremely difficult to cope, because you see a small kid raised in a house, and you share clothes, and you guys play basketball and play baseball. This dude was a very talented basketball player. He was inspired to be a basketball player. We call him the AI of Lawrence, Allen Iverson, because obviously this man was the it man. It's been 20 years.
I still hear stories of him today.
Absolutely, it's been 20 years, and if someone mentioned on social media who was the top basketball players in Lawrence, and he's in the top 3, that's phenomenal. 20 years later, the man is still being talked about as if he was like the Biggie Smalls or the Tupac of basketball in the Merrimack Valley area, not just Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So something like that is always going to be difficult to deal with, and I don't wish this on no family, and it's a tough thing to deal with.
How do you and your family cope with this traumatic experience?
Well, something like that is extremely tough. Different people have different levels on how to deal with stuff. I personally dealt, having a relationship with God was what helped me deal with that kind of stuff. Some people are different. Like, we know my cousin Alex Flavor, who was killed 10 years later after Michelle was killed. And my aunt, his mom, could not handle that situation. And slowly but surely, she declined and she passed on, because that trauma was way too much of a trauma for her to handle.
Awesome.
Because remember, this is her baby, this is her child that she fed and carried and nurtured him and took care of him. And then now, he was brutally gunned down in the city of Lawrence. So, being affected by her nephew being killed, and then 10 years later her own son, that destroyed her. So everybody in the family had dealt with this differently. I personally, how I was able to handle it was because I had a relationship with God that taught me how to deal with with certain things.
Do you have any advice that you'd like to give to anybody that's going through trauma or that's dealt with this type of trauma?
Well, absolutely. I'm not no master at things, right? But the way I dealt with it was I had a relationship with God, and being able to to dig into the Bible, I was able to learn certain things. And one of the main important things is how you can always focus on certain things, especially something that traumatic, is forgiveness. Forgiveness heals everything. So if you have forgiveness for that person, like me personally, I can't speak for the rest of my family, but I can speak for myself. I've forgiven that person, whoever was involved and in his life, and whoever was involved took him away from his family, took him away from his kids, from his son. I'm okay with that. I'm forgiving that, because what happened is that it clearly speaks in the Bible that whatever you do could come after you for generations and generations. So I've forgiven that person, because I don't want anybody to have to pay for the sins of their loved ones or the family. Just like, for example, we all know recently Nipsey Hussle was killed, right? Rapper from LA. It's a LA story, right? But the most important thing is that I wouldn't say the most important thing, but one of the things about that is that the killer's family now has been affected by that situation. Just yesterday, I read on social media how his younger brother killed himself. So to me, I know for sure, whoever is the killer, whoever was involved, they've been dealing with some tough stuff for the last 20 years. So forgiveness is where it begins. You could begin that healing process by forgiving someone. No matter what situation, it doesn't necessarily have to be a murder. It could be a relationship between a husband and wife. It could be a relationship between a man who's been locked up for 20 years and he never had a chance to raise his son or his daughter. And so she needs to forgive him and he needs to forgive her. And that forgiveness is where it starts the healing process. So that's my advice to anyone who's dealing with that type of trauma. It may be extremely tough to forgive someone, but that's the number one rule. That's where you start. Once you have forgiveness, then everything else is you can heal from that.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yes. Obviously, like I said earlier, I own a salon in South Lawrence. I would like for you guys to come check us out. It's a salon in the barbershop. Also, I'm involved with the NAACP Merrimack Valley chapter. We have a MLK breakfast that we do once a year on his birthday. So definitely come check us out. Come hang out with us. Have a good breakfast. Watch some keynote speakers and enjoy yourself.
Okay.
And keep supporting my brother over here. You know what I mean? He's doing great things for the city of Lawrence.
I'd like
the Philly man.
Thanks. I'd like to say rest in peace to Mishu. Michelet Cadet. Rest in peace to Alex Flavor. We haven't forgotten you. And rest in peace to Nipsey Hussle.
And also rest in peace to Sosa. Scientific LD. Love.
Samuel Polo Pierre, it was a pleasure having you
Pleasure's
on the
mine,
show today.
brother. Pleasure's mine.
You're welcome to come back anytime you like. We'd love to have you here.
Hey, invite me anytime, man. Especially when it comes to some hip hop stuff. I'll be here. You know what I mean?
All right.
Okay, brother. Peace. Thank you. God bless.
Peace and love. Now, let's turn the conversation on how to cope with head trauma. Here is a tip from an anonymous head trauma victim on how they cope with brain injury. They said, Merriam-Webster defines cope as to deal with an attempt to overcome problems and difficulties. I'm not sure I cope well with head injury symptoms. They seem to get the best of me most days, at least the physical symptoms. The cognitive problems have come a long way, but there's room for improvement. My biggest thing is that people don't know about all my issues and that I can maintain a bit of privacy. I've worked hard to overcome a lot of stuff over the years, and then pile on head injury, and you have one big mess of a person. I feel like if people knew about all the stuff I have going on, they would shun me or judge me in a negative way. So keeping things to myself is a big concern of mine. When I was growing up, my father instilled in me that no matter what happens in life to knock you down, you need to get up, dust yourself off, and get back on the trail. I always knew growing up that my father was overseas during World War II, but I never knew exactly what he did or where he was until after he died. One day I asked my mother if he was part of D-Day, and she said that he was, and also part of Battle of the Bulge. I went through a box of very old photos and found 3 black and white ones of him overseas with some of his group. One of the pictures is of him in the rubble of a building they had blown up. He was in field artillery. I take that picture out when I'm feeling overwhelmed and feel like I have nothing left in me. Just can't cope anymore. I look at that picture and understand his words. No matter what happens in life to knock you down, you need to get up, dust yourself off, and get back on the trail. I feel that if my father can march all over Europe and be part of some of the bloodiest battles of World War II and come back in one piece, then I can cope with head injury. Sometimes when I'm having an off day with the physical symptoms of head injury, I also remind myself that this is not a terminal brain cancer, this is not ALS, and that I have all my arms and legs. I am doing good. I hope you learned something from this tip. I learned that no matter how hard the journey to recovery gets, don't give up. That's our show for today. If you are in need of support or resources, you are welcome to attend the Haverhill Brain Injury Survivors and Caregivers Support Group at Whittier Rehabilitation Hospital, located on 145 Ward Hill Avenue in Bradford, Massachusetts. They meet on the second Tuesday of each month. You can also contact Laura McFeely, Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts office at 508-475-0032. Brain Injury United, Clinic of America, coming soon. Thank you, and see you next time on Brain Injury United.